the whole idea of the independent director, frankly, it just doesn't really make any sense.
You don't think a director is independent who needs $300,000?
He needs the money. Yeah.
He's independent the way a slave is independent. When they don't want him just independent now, they want one horse, one rabbit, one cow, one whatever.
Yeah. Oh,
Independence is not enough. You got to have a very diverse kind of independence.
Yeah. So to call them independent is ridiculous.
They determine that based on what will sell, not what will work.
Although I don't know how anybody that's getting half their income from board memberships can be independent.
Warren Buffett says the whole idea of independent directors is nonsense. Charlie Munger doesn't mince his words. He says independent directors are independent the way a slave is independent. Both of these wise men think independent directorship or diversity directorship relate more to looking good than performance. Are they right? Please watch until the end to find out. If you like this video, please share and subscribe.
And people go on museum boards, and they're expected to contribute. People go on college boards, and they're expected to contribute money. And they say it's a great honor to be on a university board or museum board or whatever. It's a great honor, and therefore you should raise money for us. Well, frankly, I think our board's more interesting than being on a university board or a hospital board or something. I wouldn't know what they were talking about anyway, and on museum board or art board. But people have found that they can make $300,000 a year, which is way more, which is enormously important to some people and is meaningless to others. And I mean, the chances are if somehow they'd arranged it so that directors didn't get paid at all, there'd be plenty of people who wanted to be directors, and it'd be a prestigious sort of thing and all of that. But in effect, it's money that comes very easily. The whole idea of the independent director, frankly, it just doesn't really make any sense.
You don't think a director is independent who needs $300,000?
He needs the money. Yeah, I mean,
he's independent the way a slave is independent.
I am going to read a few sentences which are absolutely the case, except I'm doctoring. I don't want anybody to be identified, obviously, with this. And these are word for word excerpts. I'm not telling you whether it's a woman or a man. I'm going to use a male pronoun because it's easier. But I picked out a few sentences from a letter I received many years ago. And this letter said, "I'm writing to you with a great deal of reluctance and a sense of personal embarrassment. I have tried all of the conventional means of raising the money." This person needed a couple $1 million. And I wouldn't have known the person if I saw him on the street. But it wrote this letter and said, "I need a couple $1 million." And then this is the item that I think you might find interesting. And I've kept the letter. "My income is composed 100% of my board fees." Well, I just looked him up, and at the time, he was a director of 5 prestigious companies, and had been directors of others, and he's going to be director of a whole bunch of things. But he was desperate for money, and he says he's getting 100% of it for board fees. And he was an independent director, classified as an independent director at every one of these companies. And it's just astounding to me. But it's just nutty. The idea that somebody, it's an important part of their income. I mean, what they want, they may want to do a lot of other good things. It doesn't mean they're terrible people. But if the difference is whether how you live, and in this case, whether the person would go broke, how in the world you can call somebody like that independent and say that anybody owns a lot of, maybe Walter Scott's, not independent, or maybe it's just ridiculous. But it's the way the rules are, and we follow the rules. But
Warren, they don't want them just independent now. They want one horse, one rabbit, one cow, one whatever.
I feel like Galileo.
Independence is not enough. You got to have a very diverse kind of independence.
Yeah, and if you desperately need the money, in this case, 100% of the income coming from it, you're on 5 of the most prestigious boards in the country, and classify as independent on each and other, and all you're hoping is that your CEO gets called by another CEO and says, "Is this guy okay?" And you say, "Of course he's okay," which means, of course, he doesn't cause trouble, and so he gets on a 6th board. Anyway,
I know. All I say is it's not our idea of an independent director.
No.
I hope that we have we do have a group of directors that I think will be very conscious of doing the right thing.
The reason I asked the question is because the other point you made, which I think is a very smart one and is often misconstrued in the corporate governance land, is that an independent director these days isn't always independent in large part. And you make the point that those that don't come to the table with some form of wealth often need the job. They need the money, they want the money, and therefore that makes them less independent. And the reason I ask this is one of the things, as we've been trying to get more diverse candidates on boards, more women on boards, as you know, there are fewer CEOs, fewer people who have made enormous amounts of money, and people therefore then can question their independence. It becomes a very tricky issue, and that's what I was hoping you might weigh in on.
Yeah, Andrew, I've been on 21 publicly owned boards of publicly owned companies, and I've seen them in operation. And I would say that people that I have often seen, and that's perfectly understandable, I have often seen people who are classified as independent directors, and they are getting $300,000 a year for a job that takes them a couple of days, maybe 6 times a year, maybe 4 times a year, and the company flies them to their office, and it's very enjoyable, and the company's good, and who wouldn't want a job like that? I mean, it's an incredible job, and I get calls from headhunters, I get calls from CEOs, and they ask, who I think would make a quote good end quote director, and what they are asking is, who is not going to cause too much trouble, and who their name is going to reflect credit on the institution. And they are not looking for somebody that I would regard as really independent. And I don't blame them. I mean, if I had spent my life being a teacher or whatever it might be, I mean, my IQ is just as high as the average or higher than the people on the boards and all that. But on the other hand, I want to get on a board. I mean, $300,000 a year would look terrific, and you don't even have to retire probably in most cases at 65 or anything of the sort. So to call them independent is ridiculous. And if you're on one board like that, you want to really go on another one and make $600,000 a year, and you are not going to do things that irritate your present CEO. So when he or she gets a call and says, "Would this guy make a good director?" that the answer is no. I mean, it's just ridiculous to ignore the factor of compensation with board members.
When it gets to so-called best corporate practices, I think the people who talk about them don't really know what the best practices are. They just know what they think are the best practices. And they determine that based on what will sell, not what will work. And so I like our way of doing things better than theirs, and I hope to God we never follow their best practices.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out one thing on independent directors. I mean, I've been on 20 public company corporate boards, not counting any Berkshire or its subsidiaries. So I've seen a lot of corporate boards operate, and the independent directors, in many cases, are the least independent. I mean, if the income you receive as a corporate director, which typically may be around $250,000 a year now, if that's an important part of your income, and you hope that some other corporation calls the CEO and says, how's so-and-so as a director? And the current CEO, your CEO says, oh, he's fine, never raises any problems. And then you get on another board at 250,000, and that's an important part. How in the world is that independent? I mean, I really, just on observation, I can't recall particularly any independent director where their income was from the board was important to them. I can't recall them ever doing anything in board meetings or committee meetings that actually was counter to the interests. They put them on the comp committee. I mean, they're just not going to upset the apple cart because what they're. And I'd probably behave the same way in the same position. I mean, if 250,000 a year is important to you, why in the hell would you behave in a way that's going to cause your CEO to say to the next CEO, say, this guy acts up a little bit too much, you really better get somebody else. It's the way it works, but they've got these
I think
ideas.
it's a little worse than Warren's telling you.
Yeah, Charlie and
It's really awful.
It was awful. I mean,
And only that Warren and I we occupy the niche for pomposity very well ourselves. We don't need any more of it. Well, we are completely out of step with modern practices with directors. The modern practice is to have one from each diversity category and to have a whole lot of people who need more or less the $100,000 or $200,000 per year that they're paid for being a director. And people think this makes the system better. At Berkshire, all the directors are rich, and they own a lot of stock in Berkshire, and they're all very smart, and they don't get any liability insurance provided by Berkshire. So we've been waiting for our system to spread, but we seem to be losing.
Yeah, it's a tough job at times to be a director. The real problem that you can face and may often face is when you're dealing with mediocrity. I mean, if you have a baseball team and you have a 240 hitter in the majors, 240 hitter in the majors is still a pretty good baseball player. But if your job is to have a winning team, you get rid of them. And you find somebody that can bat 280 or 290 and field just as well. In business, the tough part is to get rid of something a notch or two above mediocrity, but not the best one that could be found. And when people meet every couple of months, they come from different parts of the country, and they have the normal social instincts. They don't like to have rump meetings or to sort of talk behind people's backs. It's very difficult for a group, and particularly if it's a group like Charlie described, where a significant number of them, the directors' fees they earn are important to their well-being, and they'd love to be recommended for another board and add another $100,000 a year to their income. It's very difficult for somebody to lead a charge and all of a sudden start at the meeting or trying to arrange a rump meeting of some sort to say, we really think this guy at the head of the table is no good. And dealing with mediocrity, or like I say, a notch above it, is a difficult problem if you're a board member. And we believe that independence is a state of mind. I mean, and it's the willingness, but not the eagerness, to challenge the ideas of others, and if you see a merger that doesn't make sense, and Charlie and I have seen a lot of them, and we've been on the boards, and sometimes we've spoken up, and sometimes we haven't spoken up. If you feel that the group around you, in terms of social behavior, can only tolerate a certain amount of obnoxiousness on the part of yourself, you have to sort of ration it out. And so you save yourself for big ones, and then it's not necessarily an easy equation. And certainly, I would say, of the things I've seen proposed in the way of major acquisitions, and a significant percentage of them I wouldn't do myself. But would I overrule somebody else? I wouldn't get the votes probably anyway, and it's a very difficult thing to do. You occasionally fire a bullet if you think it's important enough, and usually it doesn't do any good. We have a group that every one of them has significant money invested in Berkshire. Every one of them has significant money invested in Berkshire. They all bought it in the market just like you did. I've been on all these boards, and they keep handing me things, and I had shares of this one and that one are given to me, or options or whatever, matching charitable contributions, all kinds of things. But we have real owners on our board, and what they make for being board members is really inconsequential, as I get reminded occasionally, compared to their investment. And they're friends of mine. They're smart. They're very smart. I mean, they are handpicked in terms of business brain power and quality of human being. And I really think that we have the best board in the country. But the people that want to make their evaluations by checklists, whether either in terms of diversity or in terms of supposed independence, although I don't know how anybody that's getting half their income from board memberships can be independent. We may not stack up so well, but it's the kind of board that I want to have, knowing that if I die tonight, that virtually everything I have goes to a foundation. I want to have that foundation have as much money over the years to spend as possible. And there's no group of people I'd rather have in charge of the decisions subsequent to my death than the people that we've got on.